Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of The Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I am Will Doran, WRAL State Government Reporter.
And as it's been for the last couple of weeks, pretty much the news cycle in North Carolina dominated, of course, by the devastation out to our west. This week, the legislature came back into town and passed its first of what they say will be probably several rounds of relief packages. This one was $273 million, I think.
Yes.
And most of that was for what?
It can go for a few things. One is just for paying overtime for all of the state crews that are out there. I mean, there's DOT crews who are rebuilding roads. There are, cops who are handing out supplies, going on rescue missions. And we've been hearing they've been working like 16-hour days, day after day after day. And someone's got to get paid for all that work. So part of this money is to go for that. Part of it's also to draw down more money from the federal government. We heard Speaker Moore kind of explain that the federal government has a lot of these huge disaster grants that they'll pay 90%, but the state has to chip in 10%.
Right.
So you got to spend money to make money. This $273 million in disaster relief will allow us to get some of those grants that will bring in hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars more from the feds.
Right. Also some regulatory changes in there to try to smooth the way for things for rebuilding to happen quickly. Some, for example, having to do with environmental concerns for rebuilding roads, things like that.
Or just like extending the deadline on not having to get your tags renewed on your car, not having to renew your driver's license, not having to pay taxes.
Things you don't have time to do when you're
exactly
trying to get through that. Also, that bill made some changes to election rules for 25 counties. The 25 counties designated as federal disaster area. Now, we should mention that earlier this week, the State Board of Elections met, and they agreed to make some changes for the 13 hardest hit counties. But when the legislature came into town, they expanded that to all 25 counties, saying that they wanted to make sure that all the counties had the flexibility they needed to conduct their elections. Of course, this is a little bit of self-interest, perhaps talking, because these counties are overwhelmingly Republican.
Exactly. Our friend Michael Bitzer, the political scientist out there at Catawba College, who we rely on for some things, broke down the numbers, and he found that these 25 counties, based on the 2020 results, are about 60-40 in favor of Republicans, and the rest of the state, the other 75 counties, is like 53-47 in favor of Democrats. So, Western North Carolina is the GOP stronghold of North Carolina.
Right.
So Republicans have every reason to try to make sure that elections go off without a hitch there this year. And the Democratic State Board of Elections was working with them and has been asking for, I think most of the things that they asked for ended up getting not only approved, but later expanded by the legislature.
Right. There was one exception, I think, and that had to do with, some of the changes they made, for example, if you are a voter from one of those storm-hit counties, if you've got your absentee by mail ballot, you can return that to any county board of elections in the whole the state, or any early voting site. Now, initially, the state board had proposed letting people take them to a voting site on election day.
Right.
But I think they decided that was going to be just too much chaos, probably, on Election Day to keep up with. There are also changes in terms of how you can get your absentee ballot. You can go and request one in person. You can pick it up in person if the mail isn't working real well where you are, which is the case in a lot of communities still. You can also have teams, like they call them multi-partisan teams, assistance teams. And so what they do is they go out to nursing homes and et cetera to help people vote. And so those teams are also going to be allowed to go into, for example, shelters and things like that to help people there get registered to vote and fill out their ballot and can take it back with them. So these are all things that are not normally allowed to, for elections for most of us, but because of the disaster will be allowed to make sure that those folks can vote.
Yes, and of course the irony here is that, Republicans have spent years here working on making it harder to vote and enacting stricter rules on voting. Largely based on things that former President Donald Trump has said, particularly about mail-in voting.
Right.
And then Trump himself came out and said, hey, North Carolina, you need to really relax these rules for mail-in voting in this western part of the state. I mean, his campaign knows as well as we do that this is where not all of his voters, but a lot of his voters are. and that, any drop in voter turnout out there is a lot more likely to hurt Republicans than it is to hurt Democrats. So it's been a little bit of irony watching the Trump campaign ask for these looser rules after
years of insisting they were too loose.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
But those claims Trump has made have really, settled in among a lot of conservative voters. And we have seen just rampant conspiracy theories on social media from this, on right-wing media, on, conservative-leaning Twitter accounts with big followings saying, this is how they're going to steal the election. This is how they're going to, be able to inflate the number of votes by saying, oh, well, since we let people submit ballots in whatever county they wanted, the fact that, we have 120% turnout in this county, don't worry about that. These are the claims we're hearing. That's simply not true. And I should add again, this is stuff that the Trump campaign asked for. This is stuff that the Republicans and the Democrats on the State Board of Elections approved. This is something that Republicans and Democrats in the legislature approved. And what they're doing, especially for like the issue with the putting ballots into other counties, those are going to get driven back to your home county. And there's
through a logged chain of custody.
Exactly. There are very specific rules in place to monitor each one of those ballots, count exactly how many they are, who they're from, where they're going. And so, the rules are probably actually even, they're taking a closer look at a lot of these things than even normal.
Well, and I think people who have not used an absentee by mail ballot may not understand this, but there is an identifier on it, a unique identifier code, right? So if somebody loses their ballot, or maybe it got taken away in the floodwaters or it didn't get delivered, they can simply spoil that ballot, which is to say if that ballot gets put into a tabulator, the tabulator will not read it, right?
Right.
So you will not have people voting 2 and 3 times. You just can't. You can only get the one.
Exactly.
One.
Or for people who they got forced out of their homes, their ballot was there, and they're worried that is someone going to find my ballot and fill it out and vote in my name? If you're worried about that, you can call your county board of elections
Tell
and
them
say,
to spoil it.
Give me a new one, and they'll be able to get that done for you. I will say our colleagues here with PolitiFact North Carolina have been doing a lot of fact checking on this. Some of the national PolitiFact folks have been having their eyes on North Carolina too, since this has been national news. With Trump putting this big emphasis on North Carolina here. So go check out those fact checks if you are curious about what the actual facts are on the ground with how all of these new rules work. There are plenty of resources on our website.
Yeah, we should mention. I mean, there not just about elections. There's just so much disinformation out there. Misinformation, disinformation. You decide which one it is, right? But there's a lot of it out there. And former President Trump, I went to covered his rally last Friday in Fayetteville, his town hall, repeating a lot of these claims that people are not getting any relief because all the money is going to immigrants, which is not true. There's a lot of things, calling it Katrina, for the lack of response from the federal government. This is, of course, this has been pushed back on very hard by Republicans like Chuck Edwards, the congressman who represents that district, as well as Democrats saying, this is not productive. This harms the morale of people who are up there working very, very hard to do this rescue work and relief work, and this is not helpful to the overall cause, but that doesn't seem to be stemming it.
Yeah, Governor Cooper weighed in on Friday with a tweet of his own slamming Trump and saying that he said that this is a flat-out lie. Trump's lies and conspiracy theories have hurt the morale of first responders and people who lost everything, helped scam artists, and put government and rescue workers in danger. And, we have heard, unfortunately, of scams happening out there, probably a whole lot more to come in the weeks, ahead, and it doesn't help when people just have wide mistrust that
right.
That can.
I mean, we've heard about people getting shot at, going to help people up there, right? So they're feeding the paranoia certainly doesn't help anything. Absolutely. We are going to take a quick break to pay our bills. We hope you'll stay with us when we come back. Talk a little bit more about what happened this week. Stay tuned. And we are back with The Wrap. Laura Leslie here with Will Doran looking at the week that was. So, basically, pretty much everything seems to be tied to Helene this week, which is completely appropriate, I guess. We had a little bit of a mishigash, as I was calling it, with the Franklin County Sheriff, Kevin White, calling for the resignation of the Franklin County manager, Kim Denton. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this was a story that our colleague Destiny Patterson covered, and it was this really just odd occurrence up here in Franklin County. People might remember Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson did an event in Franklin County with the sheriff to talk about hurricane response, get some supplies sent out west, ask people to donate to Franklin County. You know, the state has its own portal, association sort of, that people can donate money or supplies to.
And the Red Cross does too. And yeah.
Right. But Robinson said don't give it to the state government, give it to the Franklin County people, and he'll get it out there. And then after that happened, the county manager didn't mention this specifically, but pretty soon after this sent out an email that said, hey, if you are a county employee like the sheriff who is doing big supply drives or sending lots of donations, sending, county supplies out west, please run that by us. Please keep your receipts, because normally anyone in government who does this kind of work can be eligible to get reimbursed for it by FEMA.
Right, and that initial response stuff, I think, is 100% reimbursable.
Exactly. But if you don't have your receipts to prove what you did or to prove that you did it right, then you're just, your local taxpayers are going to be on the hook for everything that normally would be covered by FEMA. So county manager sent out this note saying just, hey, please be careful about what you're doing. And the sheriff said that she needs to resign because she is just injecting bureaucracy into the process.
Standing in the way of help.
It probably does take a few more minutes to log your receipts. I've often complained about having to turn in my own receipts for reimbursements. But especially when, potentially tens, if not hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars are at stake, that's something that you do want to be careful about, even when it is in a fast-moving situation. And that's not just something that applies to Franklin County. I mean, that's something that every single county in the state, as well as the state government.
Lawmakers, yeah, even state lawmakers said that. I mean, it was Moore was talking about that, Speaker Moore, that, they have to be careful about how they spend the money because FEMA is very, very picky. And one of the things that they included in that relief package, which I thought was brilliant, was a couple $1 million for basically consulting people to work with local governments to help them navigate the FEMA paperwork, to make sure that they're getting that federal money, all of it, that they're entitled to. Because a lot of these folks in these smaller towns may never have dealt with FEMA before, it may certainly not anything of this scale before, and could really use some help. If you've ever seen the paperwork for that, it is copious. So I thought that was a really bright idea.
Yeah.
Speaking of Robinson, he offered a commentary from the dais on Wednesday. He actually presided over session, which is the first time that's happened in some time, I think. But he had some comments about politics.
Yes, he said that it is a shame that people have politicized the response to Hurricane Helene, which I think left a lot of us kind of scratching our heads because Robinson has been consistently blaming Governor Cooper for anything and everything that's perceived to have gone wrong with the response. So I'm not entirely sure what his definition of politicizing would be, but he offered up I don't know, an ultimatum of sorts. Is that how you would describe it? Or
I guess, yeah, something about he would resign if he couldn't help people. Yeah, and everybody else should too. Yeah, if you can't help people, just resign your office.
And it was in his very patented, fiery speaking style, but it came right after all of these very, often tearful remarks from lawmakers out west, very emotional. And I think a lot of people just didn't really know how to respond to that. It just, saw a lot of people, a lot of, lawmakers just kind of, looking at their neighbors, trying to figure out what was happening or how to respond. But in general, everything we saw on Wednesday was very bipartisan,
Very bipartisan,
very kumbaya.
They could have taken up. They had enough people there. I think they could have taken up veto overrides, and they did not. And I mean, to their credit, also, this was not supposed to be a fully staffed session. This was supposed to be just, like an interim session to keep things going until after the election. And all these folks are running for re-election, or let's say the vast majority of them, right? But they all put down what they were doing and got in there to get those votes in.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so impressive. People definitely took it seriously. Both sides of the aisle, they showed up. So.
Yeah, and there was hardly any of the normal political sniping over, details that did or didn't get added into the bill. Because, some people did disagree on that, but they, for the most part, left it.
Well, they're going to be coming back on October 24th for the next round. So we will see what gets added in the meantime. But as they did with Florence, with Dorian, with Matthew, with COVID, there will be multiple rounds of these as damage assessment is completed and things get to be clearer about what's needed and what FEMA will pay for and what FEMA probably won't pay for. So one other thing I really wanted to mention is that our colleague Brian Murphy did a story that Dan Bishop is suing Jeff Jackson's campaign for slander over a push poll.
Yeah, those polls that you'll sometimes get, texted to you that, say, hey, if you knew this
If you
really
knew that John Doe
terrible
beats
thing
his
of-
wife,
yeah.
would you vote for him?
Which is not exactly a real poll. It's just, a way of, spreading awareness about something with your campaign. Apparently, Jeff Jackson's campaign had, referenced an article that some left-wing news site had written accusing Bishop of representing people who had swindled elderly people, and phrased it in a way that Bishop believes was defamatory against him. I think that the news site has since corrected its article based on some complaints from the Bishop campaign. So seems that at least some or all of what they had reported wasn't entirely true. I am not entirely familiar with the process, obviously, of how another news organization operates. Especially the ones on the more partisan side of things. But it does seem a bit odd to be bringing a lawsuit like this so late in the campaign, and especially over this issue that, push polls can't go out to that many people. I'm not sure how many people even saw this originally, but now, here we are talking about it, and, it's all over the news, and, it has a potential, Streisand effect, maybe for Bishop of bringing more attention to this thing that he says is false and is
That he doesn't want
damaging his
attention.
reputation.
Yeah, I don't know. So one last thing to mention, we are, of course, still in the throes of campaign season, but less than a month left. Yay. Anyway, so we had J.D. Vance here in Greensboro on Thursday. Kamala Harris will be in Greenville on Sunday for a big rally there. And we're told that Bill Clinton is going to be in Eastern North Carolina next week to get out the vote for Democrats. That's an interesting choice. I'm sure there's a logic there. It escapes me at the moment, but maybe it's the older voters. Maybe they're going. That's what they're going for.
Yeah, I think Bill Clinton still has a lot of fans, and maybe younger voters might say, "Who? Hillary's husband?" But people of a certain age, really remember him fondly, and especially if Harris is trying to win voters over on the economy, I think probably a lot of people look back fairly fondly on the economy of the 90s.
That's a good point. Yeah. I just think to myself that the kind of voters that Bill Clinton is going to inspire to vote were the ones who were probably going to vote, right? I mean, at least, statistically, the more likely, demographic to vote. So I don't know. But anyway, I think that is about it. We will, of course, keep you posted during the week here on WRAL and on NC Capital, and we'll catch up with you next week here on The Wrap. Thanks for listening.